Hi, so today I am going to be talking about animators versus comic book artists. Hi, my name is Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for over 25 years now, and I'm here to empower you. So I was asked on a YouTube comment a question that I really liked. It kind of went okay, so I'm going to read a little bit from it. It was from Sniper Mask, and he asks, why is it that animators and comic artists approach drawing in such different ways? I feel like animators draw in an economic way with less detail, more design, more exaggeration, more volume, and more fluidity, while comic book artists focus on details, not to mention that animators are versatile and can draw in any art style they want, while comic book artists talk about developing their unique art style and stuff like that. Comic book artists aren't very dynamic either. And he says, and he asks because he's an aspiring webcomic artist, but he's also getting inspired to be an animator. So he just kind of, he wanted to know the answer to the question. And okay, so I do both comics and animation, right? I appreciate both art forms, but both art forms come at drawing from different traditions. And there's a real and the mindset is a little bit different, in part because the comic book artist tradition is a little bit closer to like a Renaissance like artist tradition, in that you survive based on the way you stand out in the world, right? As opposed to an animator who tends to need to sell himself to a studio specifically. So here's what I mean. In comics, detail is important, and so for some, not everybody, and style seems to be very, very important, and that is kind of universal. And one of the reasons why comic book artists tend to talk a lot about style, just about more than anything else, is because they are in a business. They're a business. And the thing about business is that you need to be able to stand out against the competition. Not that every artist is in competition with each other, but they kind of are, even if they are in friendly competition or even if they are friends. And by competition, I just mean that they need to stand out from their friends. So they don't want to be carbon copies of somebody. You don't want everything to look like Jim Lee's work, for example, because Jim Lee exists. And if somebody wants a drawing by Jim Lee, they'll go to Jim Lee, right? So that's the entire point. That's if you don't want to be a carbon copy of somebody else who's developed the style and the look that you're looking for, because that person already exists and that is them, So you have to kind of stand out. So style is important to a comic book artist because the specific look says something unique about that artist. That artist that's the voice of the artist, and that specific clear voice tends to attract different types of people, and it creates an audience for that look. Okay, so that's why style is so important for comic book artists. Well, and on top of the fact that you absolutely 100% need a good story when it comes to comics. It's not style alone. The early Image stuff kind of proved it, that even though they were making billions and, some of the stories kind of meh, and then it kind of it kind of fell apart among the fact that a lot of those artists also became billionaires and then stopped doing the work. Okay, so and then detail. Why detail? Why are a lot of comic book artists, not all of them, but a lot of comic book artists obsessed with details and making things look really rendered and putting a bunch of lines everywhere and stuff like that? Well, part of that is because the audience that consumes this kind of work loves it. Like one of the things that we people as human beings tend to be aesthetically drawn to a lot of the time is tiny little details. We just love looking at little details a lot, right? So it becomes this thing where I don't know what it is, but it makes us really excited to look at the details, right? And so because that exists in a lot of people, not everybody, but in a lot of people, that's one of the things that comic book artists do to stand out, is put a lot of details for two reasons. One, for that reason, that audiences, a lot of people that are like amateur artists or just really interested in art, they love, a lot of those people love detail. And it just makes them feel good. And the artist also likes drawing the detail too, right? If you don't like doing it, you're not going to do it. But the ones that love it, they do it. So that's one of the reasons why comic book artists tend to emphasize style and detail. All right. Now, the animation tradition is a little different for a couple of reasons. One, we are, again, selling our work toward a studio. We want to get a job in a studio. That's a little bit different than a comic book artist who, yes, they want to, some want to get a job in one of the big, some kind of comic book company, and they need, but they're it's a little different because they are the final product, right? In animation, the property and the look of the property is the final product. So in animation, the style exists. Like in comics, a style exists. A look for the cartoon exists. That is the style of that cartoon. There is a group of artists who are style creators. They're called designers, character designers. They and art directors, right? They create styles. They go to a school, an animation school, where they take animation classes, design classes, concept art classes, character design classes, that sort of thing, where it's all about design. It's all about all the intricacies of design, right? So what makes appealing characters? What makes design? What is going to draw the eye? What is, and so they learn all the fundamentals of style, and then they mix and match all these fundamentals in order to come up with a unique look for the show, the cartoon. Just like comic book artists have to do that in their own, have to discover it on their own. This is a conscious effort by designers to come up with a unique looking style, right? Okay, but there's a limitation that doesn't exist in comics, and that is that the style they come up with needs to be simple, because otherwise it's much more difficult to animate, because you have to draw the thing so many more times than a comic book artist needs to do it. Like a single panel takes time to do, but imagine that single panel has hundreds of drawings in it just in that one panel. You want to simplify the characters so that they're easier to draw, so that you can get through and do the animation in the first place, right? So it has to be much more simple. So that means that detail is out. It's like gone, right? Simplicity is the name of the game. Style, design, shape, creation, that sort of thing. You're limited to that in no detail. So, or the minimum amount, which means that, that's the foundation of that. And then you need to hire animators to draw within the concept, the style that you've created for the show. And that means that you need to get people who are style chameleons. And the people who are style chameleons can be chameleons of that style. They can adopt that style if and only if they have absolute mastery, or the closest thing to mastery, or some kind of fundamental foundation in the fundamentals of drawing, draftsmanship, construction, solidity, anatomy, and a little bit of design, because they don't have to design. They just need to adopt a design. And they have to be, but they have to have those foundations. They have to have the foundations of solidity, drawing, draftsmanship, right? So that they can easily adopt any style. That means that that's the difference. So they get, as an animator, we get so accustomed to the simplicity and to only doing the draftsmanship and the construction, solidity, and anatomy, so that we could be adaptable to anything that is thrown at us. That's the tradition we're coming from. We're coming from that, and we're coming from a low detail tradition. We're coming from more gestural tradition. We're coming from more energy tradition. We have to use the tools that we have. So exaggeration, for example, comes from the discovery that in animation, the way to avoid motion that looks like that has that uncanny valley rotoscope thing, because it's, the mocap thing, where animators once upon a time used to just take film and then they would just draw over the film frames of a person doing the motion, and you would get the same kind of weird uncanny valley effect that you get in modern day mocap. And what was then discovered in the 20s and 30s when they were doing that is that ideally the best way to actually avoid that uncanny valley is to exaggerate, push a little bit more, reality a little bit more. And then when you push a little bit beyond what is true, and also because freeze framing showed that the body did exaggerate more than we were able to perceive, they pushed it a little bit more. And then when they did that, they discovered that it looked more natural. It avoided that uncanny valley look and effect. So it became part of the tradition of an animator's art toolbox to push the stuff, to over push the stuff. And also silhouette and reading poses, going from pose to pose. What is the clearest way to express? That sort of thing. Because of the exaggeration, it just read better, anticipation, overshoots, things like that really sell motion. And then we bring that to our illustration and our comics because it's part of our vernacular, right? While in most small foot realistic comic art, that's not emphasized because it's just not part of the tradition. You're just not thinking that way. Okay, so that's why animators tend to, when we do comics, we tend to fall back on our tradition. The biggest flaw, of course, with an animator, a lot of the time, especially if you're not trained in design, is that our stuff tends to look kind of bland. It doesn't have a style. We often don't have personal styles. Like I have a way of, what's the word? I have a signature, like a type of handwriting when I draw, things that I tend to do over and over and over. but I tend to go sometimes realistic. I tend to go very cartoony. I tend to be all over the place, and I don't have an absolute 100% look, but I do have a signature. You could tell it's my drawing of that style, right? So we tend not to have as much of a voice as somebody like in a comic book artist. If you were to look at a comic book artist, you say that's a Jim Lee, that's a Mike Mignola, that's a, you know, like that's the thing. Like you recognize the artist. This is McFarlane, but animators often end up their stuff ends up looking a little bit like whatever show they worked on the most, or whatever design of that show. So someone who does a lot of SpongeBob stuff looks a little bit more SpongeBob-y. And if you're a Disney animator and you've been drawing Disney characters forever, then when you draw your own stuff, it looks like a Disney character, right? So that's one of the flaws, I guess, of being an animator, is that our stuff tends to not be as unique, because we tend to adopt other people's styles and designs, and we often don't hone our own voice. But another flaw that I have is that, or I don't even know if it's a flaw, it's just something that happens, is that I get bored drawing in one way, and if I can draw a different way, I will draw a different way, because I got bored of drawing one way, right? So I don't have I'm not very consistent as far as all the looks or the final looks of my artwork. It's just all over the place. I can go from super cartoony to super realistic, or semi super realistic. I don't really like going full real. But I can go there, but that means that I'm not as consistent. You wouldn't go, oh, I like this, I want more of this, and then you go to my Instagram or something, and then you're like, oh wait, that's not what I liked about the thing. So it's not there's a lot less consistency. So that's where the difference between animators and comic book artists come from. It's just the traditions. It's the survival. It's the tradition that causes us to survive within our respective drawing tradition. Market is, I guess, is the answer. So comic book artists have a market that they need to adhere to, and the things that sell in that market require them to have a specific mindset in the way they're drawing and they're thinking about drawing, as opposed to an animator who has a different market and a different person that they're selling their work to, and that influences the thought and the tradition from which they come to drawing. So, and I'm not, by the way, saying that comic book artists don't draw solid or anatomically sound. No, that they come from also that tradition. But the difference is that the end result of a comic book artist is making that draftsmanship specifically stylized, while an animator is just leaving it as a blank slate, is just the fundamentals without any of the design style, because they're meant to adopt it. Okay, so that's really the differences in mindset and tradition. All right, so I hope that clarifies things. I really like that question, because I do both, and I love comic book artists and I love animators, and I understand both sides, being in the universe of both. Now I have a foot on both universes, and I appreciate that stuff. Sometimes animators can get very snobby, and comic book artists can get very snobby at each other's traditions, and I don't think that's very helpful. I think that everybody can learn from everything. So and that's not universal. I think there's more of an appreciation of everything now. but there was a time, I think, at some point that was kind of the case. All right, so thank you for watching. By the way, let me remind you that I do have, if you're interested in drawing, I do have a drawing course. I'm going to put a link to that in the description of this video. It's for people who don't know how to draw. They can't draw a paper bag they can't even draw themselves out of a paper bag, or they can't draw a stick figure or a straight line. Well, if you're one of those people, then this course is for you. I teach you from nothing all the way to being able to at least draw some graphic cartoon characters. And by the way, in that course, speaking about design, I actually talk exactly about that. That what are the fundamentals of design? What is it? What are the fundamentals of style? What is the foundation of style? Right. Well, there is a chapter on design that actually talks about it. That goes deep into the specific fundamentals of design. So we go from and that's just like the groundwork, and then in a later course I will expand on that, but that actually shows you. I actually write down what I learned in my character design class, and then I put it and talk about it in for stick figures, like how can you make your stick figures look cool, right? So that's my that's one of the things in the course that might be interesting to you, that's kind of based on what I just spoken about. All right, so thank you for watching, and I will talk to you next time. All right, bye.